Welcome back to Church Bubble, guys. Another day, another video. So it's crazy how millennials are statistically. This is really sad. They are more broke than ever before from a generational wealth standpoint. So they're the first generation to be more broke than their parents. Now, I am the oldest possible millennial. There's a couple of days, if you look online, like when millennials cut off. And then there's also this theory of like, who do you identify with? Okay, which is really weird, kind of. But I grew up, in my young adult life in a household of millennials. I married a millennial. I moved in two or three, depending on the time, two of her siblings who are all millennial. It's been crazy just to try to see and understand these dynamics. Like, like people are out there talking about how millennials have had it so much harder than anyone else, and they've had it. So it's been so much more difficult. Although that is true, when you look at it, guys, I mean, is it really any different than any other generation? And every generation feels like they are so unique. When I was young, I remember telling my parents, like, it's really hard, it's really stressful being a child nowadays. And my dad responded with, well, if you think this is hard, try working on a farm or try, what I'm saying? It's a different level, it's a different type of stress as things become more electronic, more digital, and whatnot. Almost every generation has been under some type of stress, and there's been some in the past have been under much more. It's just different, and it's how they respond, and mostly it is how they are parented. This is a family issue. This is a family issue. This is an issue of fathers and mothers and parents and things like that. And this is why even when I went through, so my ex filed for divorce a number of years ago, but once I like tried to go through like the whole like period of trying to like save and salvage and believe and all those kind of things, at some point I had to realize like, dude, my life is moving on, and so I have four kids, and so I had to really restructure my life to fit and support my kids. Now, a lot of people didn't understand that, but I didn't give a crap, right? Like I wanted to be there for my kids because I didn't want my kids to become a statistic like I'm talking about. Okay. And I think that that is a real fundamental problem right now is like it's not millennials, guys. Okay. Like people talk right now about the Gen Zs or whatever the younger generation is, whatever they call them now. Like they're like, oh yeah, these kids are so entitled and this and that and whatever. And I'm like, dude, the person saying that, the person posting that, the person writing that is the generation who fathered and mothered those people. So whose fault is it? It's like an oxymoron. You know what I'm saying? It's like, dude, you are the generation who raised these kids. The past 20 years, we've had mega churches explode, income levels explode for pastors. Pastors get the most ridiculous properties. You have all the way from your TBNs to your mega church pastors to guys rolling around in exotic luxury vehicles. Some of them have planes and helicopters, all the way down to just smaller 5,000 person congregation regional pastors living in ridiculously sick homes and all this stuff. And I'm a capitalist, guys. I have no problem with them making money or whatever. But at the sacrifice of our mission and our cause is not proper, right? And so we've changed how we do church so that the success metrics of the church, instead of them being about individuals and individual problems and pastors and staff being involved in people's lives, it's become mostly about um, mega number, something that can roll up into like an executive spreadsheet that says, we had this amount of people respond to altar calls, this amount of people get baptized. That's why everything is funneled into a day. There's a day for youth ministry. There's a day for youth camp. There's a day for baptism. There's a day. It's like, dude, in the Bible, like people just got saved, got baptized. You know what I'm saying? Like it wasn't the way it is now. And all of this structure and all of this, the stage performances are ridiculously sick, and there's ridiculous amounts of effort that goes into practice, and there's green room ministry now, which is like a crazy thing, right? It's like people who are going to be on stage don't even associate. They're like elites. They don't even associate with people who sit in the crowd. You know what I'm saying? Like, and if they ever do, it's like in a lot of churches, not all, but in a lot of churches, I mean, the people who are on stage act like rock stars. I mean, they walk around the foyer, they don't talk to anybody, they have a real stern look on their face, almost like, hey man, I was in the green room, I'm just going to the bathroom. Like, do not touch me, do not walk up and talk to me. Um, and and so like pastors, staff, and all the people who are building these churches, they're not actually involved in normal people's lives. Almost all of them, like they're not leading Bible studies, in the community. They're not giving water, giving clothing the feet, the homeless. All those things are delegated. So there's a day when we give. There's a day when we do this. But it's not our life. It's not a life. The life is preparation for the show, and all of the week, like 60%, 70% of the efforts is to prep for the next weekend. And then there's a bunch of administration and PowerPoints and meetings and building other churches and all these things. And we just assume that if we put more churches out there, that if we build more buildings, that we open more doors, if we have bigger buildings, if we take in more money, if our stage performance are bigger, badder, louder, and more sicker than ever before, that we must be changing culture. And the reality is, guys, these kind of stats all point back to leadership in churches, that we have not focused on what. So I used to call it 20 years ago life coaching. Like, we have not focused on life coaching. In fact, when life coaching got big with guys like Tony Robbins and Jim Rohn and a lot of those guys that started in the 70s and 80s, we attacked them. Churches attacked them. I mean, Tony Robbins used to be a big time Christian, just like all celebrities, and almost all celebrities, and almost all musicians, and almost all entertainers. Like, a lot of them started out in the church, and they went away from that because the church did not know how to respond to them. So you should go onto YouTube and look up the word pod, P-O-D, life, pod life. So this is happening already in California. It's been happening for a long time in New York, where like people are living in pods. So they're living in like a 5 by 10 square that they rent, or a bunk based type of space. And this is where they live their life. They live their life there. They get out, they go use a community bathroom or whatever that's in the pod area. They go to work, they meet people, they hang out at the coffee shops, and they do all these things. But their life they live in a pod. That's what they have. And guys, I just want to tell you, with all the things happening in the world, with the Great Reset, with all these things, I mean, guys, we are just being overpowered. The culture is absolutely annihilating us because we are not prepared in any way as a church community to deal with real life issues. We can talk about doctrine, we can talk about theology, we can talk about God's will, we can talk about things at such an epic level when it comes to something theological or dogmatic, but when it comes to something practical, my golly, you would think nothing is ever happening. When you are at church, when you are listening, there could be a riot outside, in your city, and you would literally think there is nothing going on. Your pastor doesn't talk about it, and almost every church, they don't. The whole thing with the RV Wade thing is going on. Like, there was a mass shooting. I think it was today or early yesterday. It's crazy. Like, you would just think nothing's happening. And what the church can always go back to is benevolence. We can always say we were great. We lead the world in benevolence and giving and clothing the homeless, all those kind of things, because that is something easy. It is something that gets us kudos, and it is something that is non-confrontational. But anything that really involves Christ, like what he really did, I'm saying, changing culture, impacting culture, talking to religious leaders, talking to political leaders, talking to philosophical leaders of our day, and influencing those conversations. Guys, this is what happened in the New Testament church. This is what Paul and these guys did, like all through Acts, is they went and they went into the town squares. And see, we have taken that town square. When the Bible mentions ministry, and the New Testament mentions ministry, it's not talking about at all what we call ministry today. We say, oh yeah, Paul was a part of the ministry, you guys should be a part of the ministry. It's basically the pastor saying, do what we do. And I was bought into that when I became a pastor. But as I quickly began realizing, as I got into that system, into that bubble, guys, the deeper and deeper I went into the bubble, I realized this has nothing to do with what's in the Bible. And so I'm not trying to call every pastor a heathen or something. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, guys, good, well-meaning people have been infiltrated, and the power and the potency of what we are trying to accomplish has been completely diminished. There's churches out there who believe in healing and believe in stuff like that, and I think one of the reasons why they don't see that is because of the system of how they go about doing it. I think that fundamentally, like, we have created these systems, created this bubble, everything circulates in that bubble, and the reality is the world doesn't live in that bubble, guys. And so I think it's a real wake up call to all of us to think that, like, you have people like the Great Reset and Davos and those kind of things happening. And if you don't know what that is, you should look it up. You should, I mean, guys, you should try. Part of what we're trying to do here is push the idea that Christians should be smart, that you should use your brain, that God gave you a brain. You are the most sophisticated being in the universe that we know of. Your brain is the most sophisticated piece of material that we know of, and by using it, you bless God according to the Bible. So if you look at like what's happening with Great Reset and these guys, I mean, they are out there talking about this whole idea that, if you, I mean, they're showing videos and photos of, like, people living in pods and in these like container homes and stuff like this, in tiny homes, and they're not, I mean, they're straight up saying, like, if you want more than that, like, you are being greedy and you should feel guilty about that, that you are consuming more energy, and the climate can't take your big house and your picket fence and your boat, and you shouldn't have those things. You should feel guilty about that. And what, you know excuse me, what do you have to say about that? you know because if you have an opinion on any of this and you say nothing, I'm telling you, you are the problem. Like, we are the problem. That's why I started this, is to give people an open chance to have a dialogue. The fact that we're, over 500 people now in just less than, I think we're less than 2 months still, tells me that people want this stuff. The question is, what are you doing about it? When the conversation comes up, when you see something in a coffee shop, like, do you say anything? And I'm not saying you have to be an a-hole about it. I'm just saying, like, you know be nice and be polite and be a peacemaker, but say something. When you see a post online, when you see a conversation happening, at least say, I disagree, or what I'm saying, like, at least say something. People know that, when it comes to communism and things like that, that it is not the power of evil, that in the fact that evil is so strong. When you look at China, it's not that the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, is so strong that the people can't overcome. That's not the issue. The issue is the people are so weak. The righteous are so weak. The people say nothing. The people know, dude, something's wrong. Why do you think so many people are trying to get out of China? You know what I'm saying? Like, no. The reason why people are trying to get out of North Korea, out of China, is because they fundamentally know something's wrong. And they've been pushed into fear and all that kind of stuff. But if they just stood up together as a voice, if they had a leader, if they had somebody who would wave the flag and say, guys, we have got to move in this direction. Strategists have looked at it like, there are just too many people in China. They would overwhelm the Chinese military. They would overwhelm the Chinese government. Yeah, there would be casualties and losses, but they would overwhelm. They could get out of communism at any moment, at any time, if only they had a leader who would speak and stand up and say something and if people had someone righteous to follow. So I want to ask you, if you feel any kind of cohesion with what I'm saying, make sure you subscribe to this. Get behind the movement of what we're doing here at the Church Bubble. And that doesn't mean that everything we do is 100% right. I don't know. I think I started out this channel thinking, like, these are all pastoral conversations that pastors should be having with their people. But I just think it's far beyond. I mean, the more we've gone into this, I feel like it's far beyond the reach to be able to say that pastors should be able to handle this conversation, because the reality is, the reason that they're pastors would almost disqualify them for anything like this, because they've come up through a system where I mean, guys, I hate to say it, but the pastor is not the most talented person that walks through the church every year. The most talented people, the most influential people, come and go. The most talented performers, speakers, influencers, musicians, artists, business owners, all of them come in and out of church, and they kind of hang around. They love God. They might even love the church to some degree, And so I started thinking as we went along, and I was reading more of the comments, that maybe this isn't the pastor's job, because and maybe the pastor should focus on doctrine and things like that. Because I'm not saying that those things are not important for people to know. People need to know what's in the Bible. I 100% agree. But here's the thing, guys, it's the rhetoric that the pastors go about that I have a serious problem with, because they feed they feed this issue every single Sunday, because they create this bubble where if you want to hear God, if you want to come to the house of God, if you want to be a part of what God's doing, then you must come here, you must sit here, you must tithe here. I mean, when they people say phrases like the altars are open for prayer, it's like, dude, the altar of God is open 24/7, 365, 7 days a week. Like, the altar of God is always open. But we say phrases like this that seemingly mean nothing. And then pastors go, well, it's just a figure of speech. Well, dude, I get it, it's a figure of speech, but you don't understand, dude. 80, 90% of people, they literally feel like, oh, dude, I need to pray, so I need to go to church. And why do they think that? Because of you. That's why they think that. And then, a couple weeks later, the same guy or gal will be going, if only we prayed more. If only we believe in God for more. It's like, dude, the reason why all these problems that you're saying are happening is because of how I'm sorry, but it's how I know I'm not talking about every pastor, okay, but almost everyone. It's how you position God in church to people. That is why the problem exists. I'm serious. Like, if you think about it, it's like it's a reverse psychology that they're not doing it on purpose. I seriously don't think I've seen this happen like hundreds of times with pastors, but I seriously don't ever think I've thought in my head, I think he's doing that on purpose. He's not. He or she honestly thinks that that his place is the most anointed, that his place is the housing place of the Spirit of God, is more thick at his little um you know uh altar or whatever he calls it. But guys, I don't know if you've ever seen this. I've actually built altars when we were expanding churches or building churches. Guys, those altars are made out of wood, nails, plywood, and carpet. Dude, there's nothing anointing about it. It's just like in the Bible when people would think that a statue or something made out of wood or metal or gold or whatever, they thought it was anointed, but it wasn't. It was paganism. And that is in our churches. Our pastors are talking about that. Dude, this is where like the Spirit of God moves, blah, blah. And I'm not saying there isn't a history of Spirit of God or whatever maybe moving in those areas. I'm not saying that, but there is nothing anointed about your altar. Nothing. Nothing that's more anointed. Let me put it this way: nothing more anointed about that than somebody's home, than somebody's car, than somebody's whatever. If they anoint those areas, if they call on the Spirit of God in those areas, if they want God in those areas, if they welcome God in those areas, if they dedicate those areas to God, they too can have any of that stuff. And what if we taught that, how to do that, then teach people, come here if you want God's blessing? I'm telling you, that is why millennials have become more broke than ever before. And so when people in the church say, oh, those millennials, all those Gen Zs, all those, it's like, dude, it's our fault. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, let me know what you guys think. That is the church bubble, guys. We have to do better, and we can do better. And so anyway, I appreciate you guys. Thanks for hanging out, and I will be with you every single day. So check back in and let me know what you think. Talk soon.